Okay, so listen. When you acquire a fancier microphone, when you level up the microphone game, some of them require phantom power. You're not summoning a ghost, okay? So fear not. But you do need to turn it on. And what happens when you hobby at the desk with the device that has the phantom power, apparently, sometimes stuff wants to hit the buttons. Because I haven't been over where this thing is in ages. So it must be this guy. This is the closest thing in proximity to the whatever this thing's called. Stuff, yeah, it is stuff. In space, you don't level up microphones. Microphone levels you up. Thank you for your patience. I had a slight panic attack there. Hi. How are you? Yeah, thank goodness for that. But I'm here to say that I always encourage beverages on Hamster Sabi Hang. So if we're asking about beverages, the answer is always yes. My beverage is in a Guardians of the Galaxy glass that may or may not have been stolen from an Alamo draft house. Yes, thank you for your suggestions. Thankfully, I have a thing here that gives me visual feedback when it's working or not working, so. Chai and popcorn. I love that. I've been having all kinds of popcorn because I buy the brand that says it's healthy. So I then turn that into an excuse to eat the whole bag. But what do we got to talk about? You know what I want to talk about is Adepticon. Chris, Mace, Nate, and I went to Adepticon. And that is my heaven, okay? It is just all wargaming, all miniature painting. I keep drinking wine and popcorn. Yes, thank you for knowing the reference and recognizing it. Adepticon was awesome. Are conventions always long and always tiring? Yes. But Adepticon is always freaking fun. Actually, I might have some stuff to show you. If you don't mind. We will paint tonight, I promise. For those of you that are on mini painting Instagram and stuff, or YouTube, there's a painter named Banshee, Alfonso Heraldez. And I impossibly got into a class with him, like a 4-hour painting class on one of the nights. Normally these classes like sell out when they release it like in January. But I randomly got a seat that opened up. So I had to buy brushes at the con and take this class with this world-class painter. And first of all, I learned a lot, you know, how to paint and stuff, but it was mostly just like getting to see, just like getting a lecture from a real artist, you know what I mean? Like he was just talking about like the philosophy of like how miniature art should be, and just talking with passion and a lot of expletives. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you were to like go to the Met or something and like the artists came back as like phantoms and we're talking about like how this other famous art sucks and this one is good. And we're friends and I have a lot of respect for them and I would say this to their face, but this is wrong. And that's why this one over here, like, it was very fun. But so it was technically a class, technically, about painting faces. And I say technically because he would randomly go on a tangent and be like, so this is my entirely other class now, but I'm going to say it anyway. But you're talking about face structure and stuff. And so he said, does anyone have a notebook? And I was sitting in the front, I had a notebook. And so with pen and paint, he started kind of demoing and talking about certain things with faces and such. The difference between these two is like you can communicate a face just with value or with like the structure itself. This is just with pen, going through the process of developing the structure while speaking, structure of lips and stuff. And then I got him to sign it because I'm a big fan and I fanboyed, so I got the autograph. So that's cool. A cool unexpected souvenir. And then another thing is been a big fan of Blaster magazine. I don't know if you've seen this. There's only been 6 issues published. It's kind of like semi-quarterly, but it's basically indie game designers just doing experimental stuff. Like Sean Sutter's Sludge was in there. Stuff where it's like, we want to kind of work on this idea and get it like put out there, but we're not gonna like fully produce it, I guess. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, he made Sludge before he started making Sludge miniatures. He was like, I haven't had this rule set in my head. I'm gonna put it in this magazine. And now he's like made miniatures and stuff because like it's became, you know, he ruminated on the idea and like a couple years passed. But it was just a place for them to like put cool indie wargame stuff out. And when I bought it, they said, so Gav Thorpe worked on this game. Gav Thorpe has been a game designer for 40K and other games for like decades and has written a lot of the best Warhammer fiction. And he said, by the way, he's standing right over there. He flew overseas to like promote this new mech game that's coming out, and he was standing right there. He said, you gotta go get him to sign it. So I was trying not to be too awkward because as I'm just idling there with a Sharpie in hand. So this is Blaster. I don't know if I can zoom out anymore. It's like a space game. So I got Gav Thorpe to sign that as well. This is our friend Greg Horton. Met him as well at the previous Adepticon. Does a lot of the layout for this magazine and for other war games and stuff. So yeah, 2 unexpected like once in a lifetime souvenirs, as well as, you know, too many miniatures brought home that I could hardly pack. I was actually pretty good this time. I got a bunch of Middle Earth stuff because I really love that game after one single demo. And the miniatures are very fun, and they're slightly smaller. They're not like the big heroic scale. So they kind of hobby up a lot quicker. And the game seems really fun. And there's a actually pretty active community for Middle Earth strategy battle game out here in Brooklyn. So I wanted some more of that. But yeah, met a couple DF fans, people in the community. Merc and Stargazing Kiwi stopped by. It was a pleasure to put faces to names and have a little chat, so thank you both for stopping by. And I just had a great time. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, you gotta travel, you know you're gonna be tired, you know, all those things, sure, but primarily it's just a lot of fun. So I had to bring that up. But for Starforged, you know, actually at the build at Adepticon, someone asked me who was familiar with Dwarven Forge and the Starforged campaign. They said, do you have any beds? We did not. But here tonight, we have beds. For the first time ever. Oh, too close. We have a couple of these beds. And actually, this is the first one I've painted that has this bottom detail sculpted. This was blank on the ones that I've done. Hamster's going to take a little nap on stream. Yeah, sorry. So this is just actually, it's going to be a sleep stream. I don't know if you've seen that. A lot of times people can like donate to post YouTube links while the streamer's sleeping. So we're gonna try that out. Yeah, no. Come on, let me take a little nap. There's so many like weird comedy references happening tonight. Yeah. Tyler and I have been watching Very Important People on Dropout. If you haven't subscribed to Dropout, this is not endorsed by Dwarven Forge, it's just me personally. Dropout is a very good service to subscribe to for comedy content and D&D content. But anyway, this is the first time I've seen this bottom side in person. Dwarven Forge also... Okay, you heard it from Tyler, Dwarven. And that was the last Dwarven Forge Twitch stream. You're talking about sleeping and you're talking about Dropout streaming service? So yeah, we're gonna go through, and this will tell you actually the scheme of a lot of the accessories, a lot of the lighter ones. We went with this color because, like, at first, things like the console and other little accessories were just the core scheme, like this. But then when you built it out, there wasn't a lot to break it up. I thought, you know, bits like the silver parts did do some work to break it up, but we needed something else, little pops, especially when you zoom out to gaming level. It's one thing to have a piece like really close at the painting desk, but or even on a build, but when you're sitting up at the table ready to play, you know, you want to accommodate for this distance. So we went with a pretty bright and warm scheme for a lot of the accessories that you've seen in photography and stuff. Loves all the shows except D20. You know what I saw? This might be interesting. I'm pretty sure they have a separate section where the Dimension 20 shows are podcasts. They're audio only. And you're meant to just put them on as audio. Maybe that's something. But yeah. So I'm going to mix this up. I don't actually have these Picornis with me because it honestly isn't super necessary for the scheme. It's mostly just ivory. It's kind of an off-white warm color, and then something that will support that, like it's a slight brown. So what I use is Picorni cardboard and Cavern's dry brush, but you're gonna get the same result with any like light brown that will support that bright color, and then an ivory. Gonna get this a little bit closer to cardboard. Just mixing random stuff here. And the reason we need this step, it's still like a 2-step base, so it's not that bad. But you know, when we're going over Dungeon Gray, you need something like, you could theoretically just do your ivory, but over a dark, you're just going to do layer after layer after layer after layer. You know what I mean? So this is mostly here just to eliminate some steps for, like, to get to the ivory. So we'll just do this all the heck over. It's pretty much a base coat. You want this fast. There's going to be details that aren't in the ivory. I'm doing this anyway because you don't want this stuff to take a lot of time. Most of it's going to be covered up. But we're going to dry brush the ivory. So you just want something, like, enough that will be left behind. But this doesn't have to be neat by any means. In fact, it should be messy in the sense that, like, you want it in most of the cracks and stuff. Because you want it to be left behind in the dry brushing. In all my schemes, I try to eliminate precision as much as possible. You know this. So that's what we're doing here. It's a little too light. Yeah, this is like how much this base coat matters as far as the color. Like it's gonna, you know, if you have cardboard, use it, but this isn't the main color. It's just a supporting color for a really bright base. But yeah, I don't know if you've seen this up close. There's some 3D printing support stuff, but you can see a lot of cool detail in here. Little like controls for whatever, you know, functions you would have in your little bunk. There's a screen here. You might have seen that in photography, but it's a cool little sculpt. And they're sort of meant to bunk up. You know, there's a little lip in here. It's pretty cool. Controls for sleep sounds and galactic light show. Yeah, you have like the little planets. I had this as a kid, the little like paper lamp that would spin and it would have like a planet and stars pattern on the ceiling. You got the sound machine right at your fingertips. It's delightful. Yes, I don't know actually what this is going to be. What I imagine is we'll keep it simple. We'll use a color. This is one thing with Dwarven Forge schemes. It's like, can we get away with using a color that already exists? Because then you don't need to pass it off when you're manufacturing these by the hundreds or the thousands to a new color for the painters. So we have a silver, so we'll probably just do this silver. It will be cooler next to warm. Silver, like gray, is typically leans cool. So we'll probably just keep that metallic, but it will be a nice breakup for that sort of 360 function. And maybe we'll leave this for an alt or something like that. But yeah, even where like there's a little patchiness on here, I'm not even gonna worry about that as long as most of it's covered. Because again, we want to get through this step quickly and then just get to the main color, because that's the fun part. We get the main color on here for like its identity, and then we get straight to details. So that's what I want to do here. Let that dry just a moment. I put those glow-in-the-dark stickers all over my popcorn ceiling as a kid. Did they stick to the popcorn? Yeah, I remember that. It would like start falling. Have some in my bed. Rainy Day Antiques. I feel like I haven't seen that in particular, but I know exactly what it looks like. Like the date, middle of the day Antiques Roadshow type thing. Don't eat that popcorn. No way. No way. Oh man. Yeah, when I was a kid, I had the little paper lamp that the light would do the stars moving and planets on the ceiling. I had a red rocket ship lamp, so when you turned it on, it was a bright red glow. I had a sound machine for rain sounds, and I would have all these things on at once to fall asleep. And I think why I needed so much light was because I watched Forensic Files far too young. So I was convinced that at any moment there would be an intruder in my home. So I'd have the lights on. I would have to sleep towards the door because I had like the fantasy of like, all right, so I'll just squint and play asleep. Have the lights so I can see all corners, so I know exactly when to strike and or run. Yeah, the dark is scary. I was very afraid of the dark. And it was to the point where if I was like sleeping over at grandma's house or something, I was like, I would be asleep. I'd be like, if there were to be an intruder, they have no idea that I'm at grandma's house. It's gonna be like a Lord of the Rings situation when they're like in the first small town, and like the ring wraiths like are stabbing the wrong room. I was like, they'll have no idea. They're gonna be intruding the wrong place. Hello, wilderness. You'd probably have more advantage in the dark. Well, I was about 7 years old, so I didn't quite... I wasn't exactly thinking this out. I am now like an adult child who can't go to sleep without my bedtime stories. I love that app. Is there an app exclusively for bedtime stories? I remember hearing for a long time there was someone who would just like read Game of Thrones, or maybe it was like they would just speak a summary of the latest Game of Thrones episode just to have like, they had a soothing talking voice and they would just go through like an hour-long conversation to fall asleep to. And it was produced, it was like about Game of Thrones, but it was produced as a sleep podcast. I have a distinct memory as a kid of falling asleep in my armchair but not seated upright. I somehow tipped over and fell asleep. Like the whole chair tipped over? Alright, this should be pretty close. We'll just get our ivory going here. We're close to caverns. How could I possibly lose paints on this desk? I have like 12 paints on here. Okay. Because they hide behind other bottles. I got big bottles and small bottles. So if you own caverns, or you the paint or the pieces, because caverns dry brush is on here, you know this is like, it's ivory, but it has a warmth to it. I should put that on camera, that would help. You know, little kind of yellowness, which really makes it pop, not only because it's so bright, but because it's warm. It pops off of the core scheme with that bluish tone in the core. So again, this is all over, so I'm just going to take a big old brush. This is like a 1/2 incher. You don't need to take too much off, but you want it to leave behind some of that previous color. If some of it streaks into a partial recess, you know, it's not the end of the world, but... But this is it. You're just dry brushing this sucker. Base coat and dry brush. Classic mini painting move. My stuff here is pretty transparent, so we'll get a couple layers. But if you get a big dollop of the Caverns dry brush, you should be able to get this in 1 or 2 passes. But see, this is why we need that in-between color over the dark. You know, Dungeon Gray casting is pretty darn dark. So that's, you know, these acrylic layers, I mean, look at my mix. Like, this is my mix right here. Look how bright that is compared to how it ends up on the first couple layers. That's why we have to have that in-between. It's kind of a bridge between a really dark casting color and the bright base color. You know what? I don't know how it happened, but I convinced myself not to play Baldur's Gate 3 yet. Trying not to get addicted. But when I got back from Adepticon, I said, hey, treat yourself. And I bought Dragon's Dogma 2. And I played a few hours. And it's a little early to say, but I did have a good time in those 3 hours. So I haven't played any amount of Baldur's Gate 3, even though I own it and I'm excited to play it. But so far I've just played Dragon's Dogma 2. Getting a little heavier because I'm getting impatient. You won't need quite this many with caverns. So we're just gonna get brave. Gonna throw the piece around a little bit. The amount that happens for like how long I painted, I drop the things I'm painting so often. Look, I'm not even pulling paint off of the dry brush. I'm just taking it wet. Like the recesses on this are very deep. It's a very forgiving depth on this original sculpt, so we can get away with fairly wet paint. Just getting this all over. Don't worry about covering up details. Do that in the precision, though. Make it one precision step. Don't be precise yet here. Are you gonna have to repaint the details? Yes, but you would have anyway. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I see it. The other day came out too muddy and with too much coverage of underlayer. You mean it was like streaking and the paint was covering up the shadow color and not hitting the upper details as much? It was hitting inner details? Is that what you mean? If that's the case, what you could try is just the angle and the pressure. Like, you can get away with wet paint if you apply less pressure. And you know, it's kind of hard to gauge because dry brushing is a fairly aggressive technique. But imagine feather dusting, like that amount of pressure, like not like how you would actually dust, like wiping a shelf or whatever, but like the little cartoon feather duster, like digga 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 digga, like dainty. Think dainty. Do you know what I mean? And if you go with that pressure, like this is fully wet paint on the brush. And I'm doing quick motions, but my pressure is almost zero. Like my downward pressure is almost zero. It's almost like the pressure can almost feel like a brrr, like a machine, like, you know, like in the action movie, like the thing's gonna crush them until it finally doesn't. You're going down, miss, 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 miss. You start hitting. That's the pressure you want. That's the pressure you want, and no more. Only one direction is true. Not so much on Starforged because it's 360. If you're doing a model where you're like, I'm doing a top-down lighting situation, right? That's when the verticality matters. Because you're creating a specific lighting situation where the light's hitting the top part and the shadows are on the bottom. This, it doesn't matter quite so much because it's designed to go all over. So as long as you have a variation of the shadows and like the mid-tone here, you're gonna be okay. It's gonna make sense. Like I think it's a good rule of thumb to go in one direction because you're just gonna get more coverage here. But if you see a spot that you need more coverage on, don't be afraid to flip it over and do a different direction, because all you want is the recesses to be slightly darker. But even here, they're not even that much darker, because remember too, especially on the level of depth of these, there's going to be natural shadows that are cast in the depths. So this even has paint in it, but it still looks darker and you can see the detail, you know? So I guess, you know, if I think about it, sure, I'm doing it up and down, but it's not super deliberate on these pieces for those reasons. You know, maybe on caverns where there's that dead side, so it's only going to sit on a certain part, it is an interesting gradient to do it up down and keep that lower part maybe a little darker, but it's not necessarily true for every single model, including Starforged. That was one of my challenges with painting this. Was like, okay, we're not doing top down, because there's no top and there's no down. Especially when I first started with airbrushing. So I was like, how do I highlight this? So a lot of it was like sunbursty, where every plane basically had like a center starburst, because it's like, this is going to be top until it's not, and then this is now the bottom is the top, so just kind of like a central highlight. Miniature painting is all illusions and faking it till you make it, you know? It's whatever illusion you want to sell, that's what you can paint. But anyway, in general, you're right, because the most common situation that we're painting in miniature is top-down lighting. That's just not true for the 360, so do it to taste how you like. Yeah, well, I know most sci-fi minis are really smooth, which makes dry brushing not as great. And that's what I actually like about dry brushing these pieces, which are fairly flat, is we wanted like a rugged atmosphere, worn, lived in. And so at first, that's why I started with airbrushing. I was like, I can't dry brush these. It's going to be all scratchy and streaky. And then I was like, wait a minute. That's absolutely perfect for a rugged and worn look. So I just went with it and leaned into that on purpose, which I think turned out really interesting. Like, look at this variation. And then it's gonna kind of help with that factory variance, that slight range of variance between batches, where like that's part of the look. You know, some will be slightly different and more or less worn, but that's part of the overall aesthetic. So the flat metal parts, which parts do you mean? Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't read up Vertex. Do the flat areas on the sculpt have a little surface detail to pick up with the dry brushing? So, honestly, the answer is no. Like, the detail that you break up here, you know, that you see, that's all the way that's broken up. The flat areas are flat. The flat areas are flat. We experimented with a little bit of like battle damage like in the sculpt, but honestly it came to a point where like you would have scratchy paint and you almost couldn't tell which parts was sculpted and which part was paint. Like, that's how kind of subtle it was. So we were like, let's just leave it how it is and let the paint do some of it. You got scratches here with the paint, right? This is a bad example because there's the support chicken skin here, but yeah, the flat areas are purely flat. But again, you're gonna have slight streaking and scratchiness when you dry brush it. Just dry brushing it normally and just lean into that. And I don't know if you saw the last stream where I painted these, but the trick with that is you're dry brushing in one direction maybe. And if you have a area that looks a little weird, just crisscross it. Just crisscross it. This is another breaking the rule of the top-down, one direction dry brushing. Just hit it in one pass. If you see an area that looks weird, just crisscross it. It's going to vanish. It's going to just be an interesting pattern of cross-hatching that will look like cool weathering. And you can do that with just single swipe areas. You know? Just do a little X. Or however many directions. Up, down, side, diagonal. And just kind of cross-hatch it. Bender, what I would suggest is if you can check out the VOD of the last Hobby Hang stream, you're going to have to look back a couple weeks because I was at Adepticon last week. But I tried to do a section of like, okay, I'm going to not speak, I'm going to just batch paint a piece to show you how fast it goes. So you might have to click through the VOD to get there. But I do a section on the last Hobby Hang where I'm just doing one of these start to finish. I'm gonna say it's less than 5 minutes or less, and I'm talking all the details. Once you get into the groove, especially. Okay, here's the last thing too, where I kind of zhuzhed this up, and you'll see some of that crisscrossy scratching dry brushed as well. If you want to check that out. Ezza, thanks for tuning in. Have a good time at piano. But yeah, once you get going, this is like with all batch painting and army painting, the first couple might be a little slower, and that's okay because you're getting familiar with the piece. But especially if you take it like all of your straight walls at a time, all of your corners, and you start to get the muscle memory on all of where the details are, you're going to breeze through these. It's meant to be forgiving. This is probably one of the most forgiving schemes. It's similar to Lowtown, where it was just a lot of wood dry brushing. Like, because of the scratchy, rugged weatheredness of these, you really can't go wrong. You really can't go wrong. Because all of the things that go wrong with dry brushing serve the look of this. So it's very hard to go wrong with this scheme. 30 minutes a piece? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Do not worry about that. The base colors is 2 colors, and it's doing so much heavy lifting. That's why I love this scheme. It's like with 2 colors, you get a warm, cool contrast and kind of a pseudo weathering, plus your main sort of atmospheric blue-gray color. The most precision is definitely, the metals here, but I show you in that VOD. It's just about the angles, get the muscle memory of holding each piece at the same angle. So you're building the muscle memory of hitting these things at the same time. You're going to get more and more precise. It's very easy to patch. If you do hit a stray spot, it's like a 30-second, even less than that, patch phase at the very end if you really want to. Your paints are still on your palette. Just dot it. Because what's great about the scratchy base color, if you just straight up dot with the blue-gray over a mistake, it's going to vanish because there's all scratches everywhere. So you can do a straight up opaque dot over it, and it's going to dry and you're not going to see it. Timestamp, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, check out that clip and you'll see the cross-hatching dry brush strategy and the batch painting phase. Okay, so look already, it's still a neutral. I don't want this to be a huge exclamation point, but I do want it to pop off of the blue-gray. So if you imagine, it used to be everything was this, which I love this piece because it can kind of coalesce with the core as a corner or as scatter or as cover. But when you have something like the little blaster or the camera or the bed, and it looked like this, it really vanished in the build. Because at first that was my no-brainer. I was like, oh, I think they're going to be core. They're going to be core, obviously. As soon as we built it out, we were like, we need a little something else. So that's why we got here, and it really looks nice. You know, maybe up close, you know, it's quite a bit lighter, but across a build at table level, zoomed out, it looks really nice to break up the gray over kind of a sprawling build. Reminds me of older computers. Exactly, that's kind of the inspiration. Those old bulky computers. And then what I kind of like too, especially when it's like the cameras and the blasters, like the security measures, it's almost like a video game where it's slightly highlighted. Like you can see, at a glance, all the things that you could maybe interact with or take care of for like the stealth mission or something, you know? So I really like that result. I do think it's primarily a bed. Like when we set out to begin this piece, it was a bed. But they're designed to bunk with the lip. So in a sense, this could also be almost a crate. It's a sort of a lock. You are going to have this open side, but it's open on 2 of them, and then it's closed on 2 others. So if you were to stick it in a corner, it's completely closed. Right? So this is like, it has the primary function, and you know, there's a little kind of zhuzhing you have to do to maybe get a couple other things, but it can do them. You know, with this set we were trying to go for a lower piece count, so I think it's a great bed, especially because it bunks, has the physical function sculpted in. But then you have this as well, or even like, you know, I don't know, something like that. Yeah, well, that was interesting, Frida, because we got the window wall when we discovered this paint scheme for the accessories, and I was like, I am so glad that there's another kind of piece that goes with the core, a wall piece, where this can be incorporated. So it's not just entirely out of the blue to slap this on, you know, with accessories. And there's at least 1, now 2, you know, we're pushing for that LED wall. It has a slight section with some of that as well. So I'm glad that there's like a couple wall pieces that can kind of pull these together. So much room for activities. Yeah, look at all this room for activities. You go from this to this. Oh yeah, the bottom being sculpted totally sells the crate a lot more once you close off those open sides, especially. I think this is the first time I'm actually seeing this side in person, so I think we'll probably just throw a metallic on here to look like a seal or a lock, because metal already exists on the scheme. I guess it could also be the gray. Let's start painting this, and you'll see the colors that are on here. The multi-module painted to match the bed. We can try that. I got one here. So this is, you know, a little tricky just because you're painting in the middle of this depth. But just think of this whole thing as one giant rectangle, especially for this base coat. So there's kind of this bumpy pattern for the bed roll. You want to get the recesses to leave behind. And usually in this step, I will also do the bits that will be metallic, just because metallic paints are often more transparent, including Picorni silver, because of the things that make it metallic, that make it shimmery and shiny, are physical flakes in the paint. So there's more space between them when you paint it, like when it dries out onto the model. There's more space in between, so like that's what makes the color below show through. So for that reason, you know, we want a little contrast on the metals, so I just hit these with the black because we have to do it for the bed anyway. You know, we've all done our first dry brushing of metal over a black prime and it looks amazing, right? It's kind of the same thing here. I'm not even 100% sure like what exactly the function of this detail would be, but I sure painted them in metal, I'll tell you that much. It's a nice little breakup. Can be whatever you like. So the wall, oh, like this. I see what you mean. This has actually been done in some of the builds that I've seen, I think. Sort of like more of like a control room area, or like the maintenance hall, like the bowels of the machinery. You know, you just have this ridge to deal with, but it's been pretty cool. I've seen the diagonals do like a slope thing too really well this way. One normal. It's kind of interesting. You know, you have this weirdness. This would disappear if you're putting this on the bottom, though. You know, something like this. I'm a fan of little pops of color for the detailing. I hear ya. That's what it's all about. Do an executable, simple core scheme, and then bang, bang. A little something. Oh, and here too, the yellow. It also works if your ship has crashed on its side, sure. Yeah, there's a little lip. This is sort of meant to simulate like the hull curve if it's a ship interior. You know, it's a little tricky, but this is just the difficult part of the scenario. You gotta check dex, you gotta check acrobatics, or you gotta check, you know, your tech ability. Like this. Sorry, this isn't quite finished, but I think it looks pretty cool. Like, it's kind of like if you were to end cap a hallway with something like this, where like this isn't necessarily an area you're supposed to go, but you could venture there to like disable some tech stuff. Oh, and I guess if we said we were gonna do this in a metal, so we'll do this in black. In whatever we do it in, it will probably be something cooler and darker than the surroundings, so in any case, we'll do it in the black. Oh sure, a little foot grab for low gravity. Ridge would be less of an issue with hyper catalog between. Unfortunately, I only have the ramps right now. But that is definitely something you could do. Okay, Tyler posted in the Discord some answers to this question about this angle of the piece as well, so check that out. This one certainly does. Okay. Then I'm just going to use my core gray because it's pretty similar to what we do on the bedroll. Yeah, Tyler and Chris have both been super helpful on the Discord. So for specific questions like that, definitely worth tossing in there, and at least within a period of time, we try to get some stuff. Not to say stop watching. I mean, come on, we got Hamster live and in person. No, that's okay. Yeah. Tyler has all the pieces there, so easier to answer some of those questions with a visual. Let's see. I'll take a tiny brush. I mean, you can even use a large brush as long as it has a tip. This is probably the highest precision thing, but you know how we do here on Hobby Hang. It's trying to get that perpendicular angle. And honestly, on most of these, sometimes you might get a bit of paint into a part of a recess or something. I just leave it. Again, it's rugged. It's going to kind of look like a stipply effect usually if you do get it. But as long as you can get a light pressure, trying your best to get that perpendicular angle to these little bumps for the little mattress area, you're going to be okay. See, I'm just doing it light, and I can just trace across. Light pressure. Not being particularly careful, because I'm letting the angle and the pressure do it for me. Right. Oh, I must have hit this with my finger. But that's pretty self-explanatory. It'll probably just be a silver. The screen is the same as like this sort of what I imagine is sort of a glassy screen-like gauge, or the console screen as well. It's that same blue. Kind of what I was trying to go for with that color that exists on a number of pieces is like, it could be a glass, you know, machinery type thing, a pressure gauge or something, or a screen. Oh yeah, I haven't done giveaways on the Hobby Hang stream. So on this stream, guys, I do this one from home if it wasn't obvious. So I don't quite have it like set up the way Chris does in the studio. I'm sure it would be fairly easy, but like we just haven't gotten around to it. And it's just me running it while also doing it. So you know, I'm sure we could figure it out. But for now, the Hamster home streams haven't had the giveaways. The story of this stream, wow, going on 4 years now, is it started in COVID lockdown. When I was like, look, I have miniatures, and I'm sitting at my desk not doing anything, so why don't we start a stream show of just hobbying on Thursday nights. So that's where we're at. Oh, the update said it? I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't even think about that myself. So that's on me as well. But I hope you're still interested in seeing some pieces. We're painting up the bed right now. And this is the scheme for a lot of the accessories. There's kind of two accessory schemes. So these are the mostly interior leaning ones. The bed, the little blaster that I imagine is like your security measure, kind of like a security camera. There's the arm that looks camera-like. There's the little blaster. For the outside, the exterior leaning ones, these can go anywhere, but they lean exterior. It was a little too bright, I think. So it kind of went to like a camo tan almost. Still doing the same thing as far as being warmer than the core to pop off of it visually. But still being like, seeming like a little more durable, you know, on the outside, the antenna, the big gun turret, that type of thing. But this is the scheme for, you know, most of the inside accessories. Excuse me, I've already chipped the paint with my fingers. I didn't get a good layer of primer on here because I only have black primer, so it would be difficult to get the coverage. But now it's coming off, so anyway, that won't happen on overnight. But these are resin prototypes. These are 3D printed resin. This screen's pretty easy to get. Especially one... Actually, this is where it's good to get this Caverns dry brush base color onto here, because it's going to help support your glowy screen color. You know, it's way easier to get this over the light base than a dark base. So there you have that. And then from here, it's just metals. Pretty much take any silver you want. I like to, for this scheme with the ruggedness, add a touch of like brown. I call it greasy silver. That's how I consider it. So you're not like turning it bronze, but you're turning it like not super clean. So a lot of times how I do that is I add a touch of brown but also blue. So it's warm and cool together. Just barely. And this is in the painting video too. So, you know, your Sassoon silver right out of the gate is very, very bright. So you just want to muck it up a little. Just think rugged and worn, just like we did designing this. You know? We've all seen Star Wars. Yeah, I think that's a nice little contrast. And then we'll hit this that we based in black. Again, I'm not even dry brushing. I'm just trying to get a perpendicular angle and light pressure. That's really, this is what it means to take advantage of painting something in 3D instead of 2D. It's using the angles to your advantage. We'll get this detail right here. And this is all I paint for the factory, because they have to do it very quickly, they have to do it very fast. But you could do that with any of these details. Like these panels with buttons and stuff, You could just do a quick little swipe in there for some of that, especially if you did it black first. It would show up. Get a little tap in there. Here we'll get this side as well. You can get as much of this as you like, but for factory, I just do these little things, especially because this is one that, you know, it's visually higher up. I hit all the things that you can see the most, kind of, at different angles. So we got something to break this up, and then now we have this brand new thing that looks great, I think. Now you have a little locker that you can check your abilities against to open up. What is a Star War? I heard there's been a few of them. Hey Bender, thanks for your questions and hanging out and everything. Again, if I hope you're in the Discord. If you have more questions, the community and our staff are really active right now answering all your questions about Starforged, so hit up the Discord, and thanks for hanging. Watching others paint is relaxing. Eventually I'll get to my own stuff. Yeah, I hear ya. I have so much Dwarven Forge, and almost everything that is my own is unpainted. Because I paint so much, like, all the time at the studio. And that is that. Really quick, someone mentioned module and accessory scheme. That should be fairly fast. I have it in the red base of the core. We'll just leave that. It might end up slightly different, but you get the idea. So I'm just going to do the same core philosophy of scratchy, crisscross. It's going to take a few, because this is still pretty dark. Take a few passes. I think I'm even going to take a brown after this, because brown adheres pretty well. You know how, like, some pigments are just a little thinner or a little, like, less opaque? Most browns are pretty good as far as coverage, so might actually go back to that, and it will still be brighter with this touch of light paint underneath, but I vote that we have at least a couple Hamsters backlog sessions when people get their Lotan. Above these cabinets right here, there's some space, and there's a bunch of, like, little baskets, and they're full of DF. There's, like, it must be, it's for sure Hellscape. For sure Hellscape. And I think Caverns. And my idea for Hellscape is to actually, I don't have any light panels myself, so I might just do it opaque and do some kind of alternate toxic river, so it's not lava. It's based on Elden Ring. Not the poison. What's, like, the red poison? Scarlet Rot? It's like red poison toxicity. Like a sludge. But not like a lava red, but just like a more earthier kind of red. Scarlet Rot, right? I cannot wait for the DLC in June. Elden Ring has become one of my favorite games. For my birthday 2 years ago, my girlfriend Katie, who lives with me here now, got me Elden Ring. And so for my birthday this year, as is apparently tradition, she got me the DLC. As well as, if you haven't heard on past Hobby Hangs, a whole day of Lord of the Rings viewing and stuff. So yes, she spoils me and is delightful. But yeah, so I was imagining my hellscape based on Elden Ring. And even Lowtown. Even Lowtown being inspired by some of the Dark Souls environments, the tattered buildings, worn buildings. You know, it's still wood, so like you can get away with the low town scheme, but adding some interesting weathering, maybe some charring, or like more wood variation perhaps. I mean, the challenge with that is like you want your pieces to be modular, so basically if you were to do different wood effects, you'd want the patchiness, if you were to mismatch them, to work in your favor, which I think is possible. But if you want them to all match, you know, you want to just be able to grab one. You don't want to be like, which ones did I paint which? So I don't know how I'm going to tackle that. That's actually an interesting question. But I want to somehow be inspired by some Dark Souls environment, town environment for Lowtown. I'm debating on if I'll get Elden Ring on PC. I'll get the DLC for PS5 for sure to play with my current Tarnish, but I kind of want it on PC as well just because it's easier to play that for me most time. Yeah, I have it on PC just because like I have one. I'll tell you what, I've only had like one main PC for like 6 years now at this point, I think. And as long as, like, you know, I only game at like 1080p. So I've been like waiting, like people say, oh, your computer lasts like a couple years maybe, and then you gotta upgrade. I'm waiting for the moment when it starts chugging, but I'm doing just fine at 1080 with my current setup. So I don't know. You know, I'm not doing 4K or anything, so, and I still enjoy my games, so I don't know. I have not felt the need to upgrade yet. So I play Elden Ring on PC just fine. I'm playing Dragon's Dogma, which I've also seen has had performance issues. Again, I think it's just when you're stacking it up to 4K and stuff, because I haven't had any performance issues myself. Well, right, I was worried I'd have to start upgrading my GPU at least. Haven't had to do a darn thing. Got the 2070. I think what I have in there is a 1080 Ti. Like, at least what I did was when I bought it, I was like, shell out for the best at the time. Just so hopefully you get more life out of it. So far so good. My last PC lasted for many years. My newest one is doing just fine too. Yeah, that's awesome. What I do need is storage, and maybe what that actually means is I have to like consolidate my files and clean up, or just buy another drive that's clean. You know what I also did? I had a bad evening. I don't know why I did this, but I like basically uninstalled games incorrectly, so they're off the computer, but they're still taking up space, and I don't know how to fix that. So that was a bad night. Dragon's Dogma 2 also straight up tells you that there will be bugs if you go too high in the graphics load. Yeah. I saw on my Steam that Tyler has played this for a few hours, so I've been waiting to talk to him about it, because I played around the same amount of time as he has according to Steam, so I'm having a good time with it so far. I didn't finish the first one, but I did play it. And I'm wondering if I'm gonna get annoyed by the NPCs that follow you, but so far they're fun. They just like comment on everything. Like, I'll be at the vendor and like browse it and then not buy anything, and then one of them just says something like, no purchases this time yet, and then the other one will be like, he is most prudent with his gold, and I'm like, we can all calm down, I'm just shopping here. But it is kind of goofy. Wait, so you bought a new drive, plugged it in, and then the old one got jealous and then died out of spite. Is that what you're telling me? Do you have to buy DLC to remove those bugs? Yeah, no, I haven't bought any micros on there. It made for a long evening, yeah, I'm sure. Honestly, this one's pre-built. I'm sure I could put a PC together, but I just get nervous. I heard like the one thing that's like, hey, technically, if you're not careful, if you have static electricity built up and you touch it, you could fry something. It's unlikely. I was like, that's for sure going to happen to me. Never touch a computer ever. Don't touch it. You're going to shock the crap out of it. So I just have that paranoia now. But I did screw extra USB slots into the back of this, and I felt like, you know, a tech wizard. So that's where I'm at. Okay, 7:22. All right, so I'm going to finish this quick because we have one more thing that you might be excited about. Oop, this is not the one I wanted. You know, sometimes they say like no brush is a bad brush. Keep it for everything. Keep it for dry brushing, you know, that's mostly true. But when a brush becomes rock hard, I think it's time to throw it away. When it becomes a lethal weapon on the end, it might be time. Oh, I said I was gonna maybe throw some brown in here. I think that's still a good idea. This is just an arbitrary brown I had on the palette just to support this light mix. Like, I don't even care if this wet blends at this point, because the final layer will, you know, we'll have to do a couple more anyway, so we're just building up the value. This is the trick when you want to do a light color over something dark, like Dungeon Gray casting. You're gonna have to go through the steps like a ladder to get to light. So let some of that dry. That's just the strength, and I guess in this case maybe a weakness of acrylics. They're always slightly transparent, so you want to layer them up. When you can't even use it to apply glue, that brush is done. Yes, the amount of ones that I've used with like the Vallejo texture paste that I'm like, I'll just keep that for next time. There ain't a next time. I remember when shopping around for memory sticks was pretty normal. I did that part a lot. Sure. The pieces can cut you if you aren't careful. Like, now that I've owned a PC and I've kind of like configured it, at least on this end, like the user end, and I did the one part, like I've taken this apart, like I've dusted it out and stuff. At this point now, this is only my second computer. Like, I've had like laptops that could play games that was pre-bought, you know, but this is my only desktop gaming PC. So maybe at this point, especially mostly for budget, honestly, you know, I'd probably try to put it together. I should probably get started on this. So we have another piece here available to us tonight. The dome, baby! So the official piece will be cast in the transparent blue, which you've seen in some photos, same as like the cockpit and stuff. But this one I kept clear because I figured we just do some alt stuff. Because the painting, you know, there's no painting here that you haven't seen before. This is painted in the core because it's gonna go, you know, as if it's partially a core wall. So this paint job is the same. And then I just did our core metal, the same as the pipes on here. And then the prototypes are airbrushed blue, but this will be the casting color. So this piece, it probably requires the most precision out of any piece, if I'm going to be honest. Just to clear out this stuff. And the headache, this comes with any piece that is cast and transparent that has opaque sections. If you want to blast light through it, you gotta get the opaque areas fully opaque. So it's gonna take, like, you're caking on layers. You know, I go through this every time I make a piece like this. You know, the little LED bulb that's happened, Tyler will tell you. Like, any little section that you can't even tell visually when you look at it, as soon as you blast light straight through it, you're gonna see any little parts that, like, the paint is a little thinner or whatever. So, you know, especially because this is a piece, I mean, it's not so bad because you won't have as many of this probably in the end. You know, you're not having as many as, like, your straight walls or your floors, right? You're not going to have a bajillion of these. You might have, you know, get a couple sets, but this is a special piece, is what I mean. So there's no fancy trick to it except for patience. That's pretty much what it is. What I would do is just get out even a primer or your dungeon gray paint or even a black, anything dark to put the metals over. And it's no other tricks that you haven't seen on Hobby Hang before. It's just your perpendicular angles. These are sort of beveled a couple different ways, so you might need one pass on one angle, flip it around, one pass on the other. The transparent material does sometimes do this, like, liquid type thing, right, where it's beating up. You're gonna need a couple layers. This is a piece that requires patience. It's not difficult as long as you take your time, and I think, you know, that's okay for a piece like this because you just have fewer of them. But it looks so cool, and it's like one of the most impactful pieces on a build once you have it done. So if you enjoy the painting process, you know, I'm not going to say go unpainted. I definitely think you can do it because it's all the same techniques at the core. It's just this paneling. It's not even precision because of how thick it is. Like, look how high it is. It's really forgiving. It's just, you got to do it all. You know what I mean? And if you do get some on there, just rinse your brush and sponge it off with moisture, and you'll be just fine, right? Take a little moisture, sponge it off, and you'll be alright. The blue you see in the photos will be the casting color. Yep, exactly. So you're going to start blue, and the only thing you have to do is kind of opaque out these areas that are the core sections. So honestly, this base coat step, whatever it is, you could do a black, you could do a dungeon gray. These are all just going to be your metal, your silver. But really, just don't care about the color until you have full opacity. Especially, this is not necessarily true if you're not going to blast light through it. You can see on your hobby desk, you know, when you have the coverage you want, if you're not going to light it with anything. Then from there, it's just, you know, you don't really care as long as you cover everything. But it is transparent, so if you do want some kind of lighting thing, just prime the crap out of this, or base coat the crap out of it. It's going to take a couple layers. But I noticed some people, here I just actually dropped it, made a mistake, rinse the brush, sponge it off. Brand new, look at that. Some people wanted the screen. I want to do what I have here, because these are pretty matte. So it can sort of start to dull the transparency and the glassy feel, but the technique will be the same if you take something a little maybe glossier. If you do have an airbrush, I mean, that's what I used on the prototypes. You don't need it though. You're just going to thin it down almost to a wash. You want it transparent and kind of watery. But controllable. And it's almost like if you've used contrast paint or any kind of transparent paint method, if you have paints like that, use those. You're doing a similar thing here, where you want it pretty saturated but thin and transparent. Any contrast paint, speed paints from Army Painter. Like, you kind of just want a hint of color all over as an even coat. So they will do a lot better than my paints I have here. But if you are using regular hobby paints, what I'm going to do is try to get this as even as possible, but when in doubt, push it toward the edges so it almost becomes a recess. Okay? You know, it's not looking super pretty here. The other option, honestly, I don't know if anyone saw the Act Ink build from PAX, but I painted, with Chris's idea, some special torches, and we tried lighting them, changing the paint color and then lighting them. It didn't look very good, so we just did it opaque. You know, just because you have a transparent piece, if you want to light it, you got to keep it transparent. But if you don't, you know, you do have the option to just paint it too. So let's try some of that as well. So this is pretty much what you see is how we do that. A thin glaze, you're trying to get it even. The surface, you know, it's not going to be perfect for a matte paint like I have here. It's going to end up like this. But if you have something like a contrast paint, do 1 or 2 layers of that, it's going to come out a little better. See, it shows through. You can almost just paint one side, because you flip it over and you can see it. But if you want to get creative, just paint over it. You know? We'll do this kind of halvesies. Now I'm going to get real crazy and just paint, you know, a light effect. You could literally light it on the glaze side, or we can paint it as if there's a light source here. Coming from within is how I'm imagining. So we'll throw some of this down on like the lower area. Honestly, for airbrush and brush, it really depends on the application. For terrain and for Dwarvenite, I definitely prefer brush. Like, so much of it is dry brushing, and you can get a lot of mileage out of that. You know, the way that we design the schemes, at least how they're executed, is definitely the best way to paint them, I think. You know, especially with things like your caverns and stuff, a lot of the organic stuff. Dry brushing, like, just does all the work for you and is so efficient. That really is what it comes down to, efficiency. Like sometimes dry brushing or brush really is the most efficient way. But for speed, for like my army painting, for my models, like my workflow has become, you know, a lot of starting with airbrush, but that's come with a learning curve. Like, you know, I can paint a primary coverage color with an airbrush. I could paint the skin of my orcs like with an airbrush because I know in my workflow I'm going to shade it down and cover up any overspray, right? So it's not necessarily that I prefer the airbrush, but for certain things I've gotten comfortable enough with the airbrush to like replace the brush with it. But it's not necessarily like things that can only be done with the airbrush. I don't know. So I still use a combination, but on my own hobby, I probably will use an airbrush on almost every model. But that's just from learning how to use it, becoming familiar. It's the same thing with any tool, right? Have you used streaking grime? Streaking grime is really popular. You'll use it a lot if you've learned how to use it, right? You know, washes versus layering. Sometimes you use both, sometimes you use one or the other. Sometimes as you get more familiar with layering, you'll start doing less and less washes. I don't know. So it just depends on the application. I have a great time using airbrush and brush. I think the perfect situation is using both. It's the low, here's what I'll say, I guess. The low precision stuff, try to do with airbrush, because you can't get exactsies on tiny things. But get as much done as possible, like the broad stuff with an airbrush is what I like to do. And then you use that last 10% with a brush for the precision. But don't do 100% of it with the brush, because that's too precise. And you can get away with not doing that. So that's kind of where I sit with airbrush and brush. We ran into Reaper, yeah. We ran into Reaper, and Mace was... They always have these awesome tables where you can just sit down and start painting. And sometimes they'll even have minis. It's like you have a paint and take situation there. So yeah, there's always people painting there. I didn't get a chance to talk with them. They chatted with us as a group, like briefly a couple times. But yeah, I know Chris and Mace ran over there a little bit. Was there something in particular? I didn't myself, so was there something in particular that they did over at Adepticon? CLK, have you used airbrush at all? Or why do you ask? Sure, yeah. Yeah, they always go. They're always really popular. Like, their paint and take tables are always popping. Let's see. Other companies that you might know just from like the paint companies, or if you watch mini painting YouTube, a lot of people will use these products. You know, Scale 75 was there. Iwata Airbrushes was there. Turbo Dork, if you've used their kind of metallics and color shift paints, Turbo Dork was there. We randomly ran into them at the first restaurant we went to. That happens a lot, where you know, every restaurant or hotel area or like, you know, place you go to outside of the con, you'll see convention people there. DF in the past has done stuff with Eldritch Foundry, and they were there as well. We put some Starforged prototypes on their build, and they gave us some minis to throw on our stuff as well. So they were there. Yeah, that's definitely how I started with airbrush. It was all priming a base color, a varnish maybe with airbrush, and that gets you used to the control because you don't have to have as much like control on the trigger and the pressure. It's just kind of all over, right? I will say, using many different kinds of airbrushes, I wouldn't, as tempting as it is, I would not get the cheapest airbrush. I wouldn't get the pack that's like randomly on Amazon or whatever, just because it's gonna give you a headache and it's not you doing anything wrong, it's just the crappy airbrush. So I would look at a Wada. My favorite is the Eclipse. It's exclusively what I've used, even for precision stuff. Usually at a Michael's or some art store, they have coupons or sales that you can look out for where you can get these things like half off, okay? The Wada Eclipse is great. I think they have one model down that's a little cheaper. You could get away with it, but what I like about the Eclipse is when you do get better with it, you can get away with like slightly more precise stuff. But any Iwata, honestly, that you would get is gonna do you well. I know some people like Badger. I have like the cheaper Badger model. It works good. It's like well constructed. I prefer how the Iwata comes apart because you got to take these things apart a lot. Eventually, you're gonna have to clean them out really well. You might need to troubleshoot them. So I prefer how the Iwatas come apart a little bit more. But Badger's definitely a reliable brand if you find a sale or something. Other than that, my compressor is just one on Amazon, like $100. Just get one with a tank. Otherwise, it's running constantly. Like, it's either filling the tank and being quiet until it has to refill, or it's just constantly going. So it's definitely worth getting one with a tank. And especially if it's Iwata, Iwata has a nozzle wrench. The nozzle is the really tiny part that the last point that the needle goes into. It's that little cone. They have a nozzle wrench that kind of holds it when it comes out, and it's like, I don't know, $10, like super easy. Like a lifesaver to get the nozzle wrench. So definitely buy an accessory like that. But yeah, that's what I would say. For the compressor, make sure there's usually a thing you unscrew on the bottom where the built-up moisture will drain out. Do that every time, otherwise it will build up condensation and stuff in there. Yeah, Iwata, thank you. Look at Iwata Eclipse. I think Neo is the one below. But if you can spring for the Eclipse, it's a workhorse. It'll last you forever. It's my favorite. I've used multiple of them, just from having them at the studio and stuff, and of my own. I love that one. Yeah, and if you get into it and you have any airbrushing questions, if you're in the Discord, feel free to tag me at Hamster and ask me. Also, the community has a lot of experienced painters that can help you as well. But yeah, it's definitely worth learning the airbrush. It's very fun in the hobby, saves a lot of time. You can do a lot of cool stuff. Are you having a compressor at work? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. What people have told me in the studio is that, it kind of blurs out. They don't really hear it, but who knows? Because I get in the zone and I don't notice it, but I'm used to it, so. I don't think I'm disrupting too much. But yeah, if you want to paint your dome or your cockpit or transparent in a different color, because it's cast in blue, you're going to want to do something that blue supports. So you could get it to a green, possibly. Probably a purple also. But if you were to do something like red, it would kind of just get muddy. Like if you're going straight, think of the color wheel. Think of the color wheel and the distance you have to travel. So you're for sure starting at blue. So if you're going to something really far away, it's gonna be hard without just going straight opaque and changing it. It's gonna be really hard to get there. But if you do to the ones next to it, you might be able to glaze it to get purplish or greenish. Yeah, definitely look into Iwata and feel free to ask questions. And again, I'm telling you, there's sales all the time on like websites, even on Amazon, brick and mortar art stores. So I doubt you'll even pay full price for it. But see, here we're just kind of doing a yellow to green to blue-green type of fade. As if there's something glowing in the room under the dome. So you can get as crazy as you want with this type of stuff. This is a good note here on this patchy part. If it's transparent material, the paint is always going to adhere not quite as well. So it's going to take a few layers and you might start pulling out paint like I was. Just let it dry a little more, hit it with a hairdryer, and do light pressure with your layers. Otherwise you might start pulling up paint like I was, if you notice that. But I got it fixed here. So just let that dry completely. Welcome back, welcome back. Someone also on the Discord, I think, mentioned like a dome similar to the copper roof of Lowtown. We'll try something like that. I don't have my copper with me, but I'll throw my silver and like a brown ink into it. This is going to be an opaque scheme then, in this case. But I thought it'd be cool. I thought it would look really neat because it could go onto the entirety of it, like these things that are typically silver for now. I don't know if I can quite get a copper, but we'll start with this. It's a little coppery. You could probably even, since it's kind of a cap, you know, it might not sell because it's sculpted like the top of a wall exterior, but I'm sure it would read fine in a build. Making a huge mess, but it's okay. It's still warm against cool. It's kind of neat. This isn't a perfect copper red down here, but I did royally screw up this half, but that's alright. Yeah, this could totally read just as far as its sculpt and construction, like as a fully metallic type thing. That's actually kind of a cool idea. If I get a big clump on a dry brush, I might do an extra swipe on the paper towel, but otherwise, when the details are raised up, you can get away with wet paint, usually. But you can see how having something warmer on top of this immediately helps it pop. It's a little cooler on camera now that maybe it could be my monitor too, but you can see here too, this is basically like one layer of green. So this is probably what you could get away with right here, this top panel, over the transparent blue. Just because the blue is going to exist a little bit, but getting this bluish green, you could probably get away with. And you're going to lose a little bit of the transparency, which especially this is matte paint, but I think if you were to do multiple glazes of like a glossier ink or something, this is a good example of by the time you get it green, it's probably gonna look similar to this. But you can still see through it slightly. So here's the thing, as soon as you do start blasting light through these, like, they're really powerful. So, you know, it's gonna take a lot of acrylic paint to actually make it fully opaque. So you could probably get away with something like this. If you want a green like this, you're gonna need a lot more opacity. So for those wanting green, I love that idea. We tried it off the jump on some experiments. But if you're on the blue casting color, this you can get away with probably and keep it transparent. This is gonna require more paint, making it warm as opposed to a cool green. But I think the cool green, you know, is appropriate for sci-fi. So I think that'd still be cool. But again, if you're not blasting it with light or doing transparency like tricks, just paint it. Just paint it opaque. I had another thing I wanted to do. Excuse me. So this is just a straight silver, not mixed with anything, not greased up. This particular one is Vallejo metal color silver. It's maybe not quite as bright as the Sewell silver. I just have it on my desk, so you know I'm not using it for any particular reason. But someone did ask about silver pipelines and ramps. Here's the thing about that. You know, we tried that off the bat. Obviously, with pipes, your first thought would be silver, so we tried it. And like across a build, do you see how they both are kind of cool? It does start to vanish a little bit. So that's why we went with the worm, so that it starts to separate more, especially when you're looking at a sprawling build at table level. Now I think this person in the Discord was considering this a silver scheme for use with wildlands. That is when this would be fantastic. Why? Because the wildlands is warmer. So you start throwing these on there, they're gonna separate visually because they're cool. So this is why I know it's a lot of people have asked, excuse me, why the pipes aren't silver. And this is why. You know, we're all zoomed in here, but once you start having a whole build, even a small one, and you start throwing these on, there's this, you could get more out of them visually when they have the warm cool contrast. But the idea to put them on wildlands like this, that is a neat idea. I like that a lot. It's the same idea as the accessory scheme. The warm cool, it's the same idea as the two base colors, warm and cool. So that's always a good neat trick for your miniature painting as well. I think that's why I've been thinking about this a lot. A lot of people think like, oh, purple shadows on my minis is cool and interesting. That's true, but I think why is because it's also a rule of thumb of like highlight with ivory, don't highlight with white, highlight with like an off-white. That's a warmer highlight, right? And a lot of kind of battlefield lighting situations that we're painting have a warmer highlight because it's like sunlight. It's like a warm light source. And so when you have a purple shadow, it's a cool shadow. So you have a warm, cool contrast. But you can do that in reverse. You can do that with a different color. It could be a bluish shadow. If you haven't looked into the color Payne's Gray, it's a very, very dark blue in place of black. It's going to add a lot more interest. I have a Payne's Gray ink right here for that reason. So yeah, anytime there's, people always say mini painting is about contrast, right? Add more contrast, add more contrast. It's not just the brightness, the black and white values. You can also have temperature contrast. You can also have texture contrast. So we have a scratchy texture on these. Something really clean and neat on top would also have a visual contrast. So that's why we do, you know, things like this at the old Forge. In 2 steps, you have multiple bits of contrast. There is a slight value contrast, even though the main color is pretty dark. They are closer together, but there is a slight highlight and temperature contrast and weathering and all that. I've talked about this. But yeah, I hope this has been fun to watch. I'm happy to be back. I believe there should be one more Hamster stream before campaign end. Is that right? Or maybe not. Okay, so it's on the 3rd, so we don't have another Thursday. However, tomorrow I will be on stream again with Miles and the help of Chris and Tyler. We've announced this, right? We've announced tomorrow's stream. I think I saw it in an email. Okay, yes, we are playing 5 Parsecs from Home. Chris bought the rulebook at Adepticon. We love it. We read it on the plane. I picked up the PDF because we wanted to try it on stream. We threw around a couple ideas of what to stream. We chose this one. It's a solo or cooperative campaign adventure, kind of like a mercenary skirmish type thing. You know, roll up a crew of mercenaries. They're going to get gear, they're going to get backgrounds and personalities, and then you can acquire experience and items and stuff as you go through solo or cooperative missions. And it seems really fun, really easy to pick up, but a lot of depth in the progression. So I'm really excited about it. I believe that's at 2 o'clock Eastern tomorrow. And we're also less than 4K from the LED walls. Heck yeah, I love to hear it. I look forward for your impressive record of losing in every Dwarven Forge stream or recording to continue, Hamster. Yes, the losses continue at 2 p.m. Eastern. Can Hamster lose at a cooperative game? Tune in and find out. I think that's already happened once. We played Rangers of Shadow Deep, and I was just the one failing rolls horribly. It was 8K earlier in the stream. Okay, great. So thank you so much for your support and for tuning in with me here for the painting. I really love this scheme, so I love talking about it and showing it off. And I will see you 2 o'clock EDT tomorrow. Have a good one. See you then.